Welcome to Return to Wholeness with Heidi Marquez, founder of the Return to Wholeness Method. In this lesson, we're continuing our journey toward understanding the deeper roots of healing so you can reconnect with your mind, body, spirit, and soul. Remember, healing isn't about becoming someone new, it's about remembering who you were before survival patterns disconnected you from your authentic self. Let's move forward with this lesson to explore emotional triggers and attachment, which are two concepts that shape how we experience relationships, conflict, and connection. Many of our strongest reactions aren't just about what's happening in the present moment. They're often connected to past experiences that taught our nervous system how to stay safe. Throughout this lesson, we'll discover why we become emotionally activated, how attachment patterns develop, review the 4 primary attachment styles, recognize the protective behaviors that often emerge during emotional activation, and most importantly, how healing is possible. Remember, these patterns aren't signs that something is wrong with you. They're adaptive strategies your mind and body developed to protect you. As we build awareness, we also create the opportunity to respond differently and move toward greater emotional freedom. Healing begins when we understand that most reactions are protective responses, not personality flaws. Let's review what an emotional trigger is. An emotional trigger is a reaction that feels much bigger than the situation itself. Something happens in the present, but your nervous system responds as if an old experience is happening again. That's because triggers often activate unresolved emotions, memories, or beliefs stored beneath conscious awareness. Experiences like rejection, criticism, abandonment, or feeling misunderstood can quickly activate protective responses. While the current situation may be real, the intensity of the reaction is often influenced by past experiences. Rather than seeing triggers as problems, begin viewing them as information. They're your nervous system's way of saying, something here reminds me of a place that still needs healing. Keep in mind, the goal isn't to eliminate emotions or avoid being triggered. The goal is to develop enough awareness and regulation that you can choose your response instead of reacting automatically. Every step toward awareness creates more freedom, healthier relationships, and a deeper connection with yourself. Here we have a visual on the trigger formula, because every emotional reaction typically follows a predictable pattern. First, something happens. Then your mind interprets what that event means based on previous experiences. That interpretation creates an emotional response, which often leads to protective behaviors. For example, if someone doesn't respond to a text message, one person may think they're simply busy, while another may interpret it as rejection. The event is the same, but the interpretation creates a completely different emotional experience. This is why awareness is so important. By slowing down and examining the story we're telling ourselves, we begin creating space between the trigger and our response. That's where lasting change begins. Feel free to pause and take notes. Let's review where triggers come from. Triggers rarely begin in adulthood. Most develop through repeated experiences that taught the nervous system how to stay safe. Childhood relationships, emotional neglect, criticism, trauma, chronic stress, betrayal, or shame can all shape how we respond later in life. Over time, the brain learns to recognize patterns and prepares us for what it believes might happen again. This process is incredibly adaptive, as it helped us survive. However, those same protective responses may continue long after the original threat has passed. Healing doesn't require blaming the past. It involves understanding how those experiences shaped us so we can intentionally create new experiences of safety and connection. Now we explore the concept of emotions as energy in motion, because they're designed to move through us and not stay stuck within us. Every emotion carries information. It signals that something important is happening internally or in our environment. When we feel safe, we naturally notice the emotion, experience it, express it, and allow it to pass. However, when an emotion feels overwhelming or unsafe, we may suppress, avoid, or disconnect from it. Instead of completing its natural cycle, that emotional energy can remain stored within the body, contributing to tension, chronic stress, pain, diseases, emotional reactivity, or recurring patterns. The goal of healing isn't to eliminate emotions, as it's to restore their natural movement. As we build awareness, regulate our nervous system, and create experiences of safety, emotions can once again flow through us instead of becoming trapped, allowing greater resilience, connection, wellness, and emotional freedom. Now we shift our focus to understanding attachment. Attachment is the emotional blueprint we develop through our earliest relationships. It teaches us whether the world feels safe, whether our needs matter, and whether it's okay to depend on others. These early experiences shape expectations we often carry into adult relationships. When our attachment needs are consistently met, we tend to develop greater trust and emotional security. When those needs are inconsistent, unavailable, or unsafe, protective attachment patterns can develop instead. The important thing to remember is that attachment styles are learned, not permanent. Through healthy relationships, self-awareness, and nervous system healing, we can gradually develop a more secure way of connecting with ourselves and others. Here, we cover 4 attachment styles, which are adaptive strategies, not permanent identities. They can evolve through healing and corrective experiences. There are 4 primary attachment styles. Secure attachment is characterized by trust, healthy communication, and emotional flexibility. Anxious attachment often seeks reassurance and fears abandonment. Avoidant attachment values independence and may distance itself emotionally when vulnerability feels unsafe. Fearful avoidant attachment experiences both a desire for closeness and a fear of getting hurt, creating a push and pull dynamic. Like mentioned shortly ago, each of these patterns developed as an adaptive strategy, not as a personality flaw. They represent the nervous system's best attempt to stay safe based on past experiences. As we build awareness, regulation, and healthier relationships, these attachment patterns can become more secure over time. Now we elaborate on how triggers activate protection. When we're emotionally triggered, our brain shifts into protection mode. Instead of prioritizing connection, it focuses on survival. That's why we may become defensive, withdraw, over-explain, seek reassurance, people-please, or shut down emotionally. These behaviors aren't random, as they were once helpful strategies that protected us from emotional pain. However, what once kept us safe may now interfere with healthy relationships and authentic communication. Healing isn't about judging these responses. It's about recognizing them with compassion and understanding the unmet need beneath them. Once we feel safe enough, we can begin choosing responses that align with who we are today, instead of who we had to become. Here we have a visual for the trigger cycle. Triggers typically follow a repeating cycle. An event occurs, your brain assigns meaning, emotions become activated, and protective behaviors emerge. Those behaviors often create conflict or reinforce the very beliefs that started the cycle. Without awareness, the pattern repeats again and again. Healing begins when we interrupt that cycle. Instead of reacting automatically, we pause, regulate our nervous system, become curious about the story underneath the emotion, and intentionally choose a new response. Every time we do this, we teach the brain and body that a different outcome is possible. Over time, those repeated experiences begin creating healthier neural pathways and more secure patterns of relating. Here, we identify how healing happens, as it is quite the process and requires intentional effort. Healing isn't about avoiding emotional triggers. It's about creating new experiences of safety. The process begins with awareness, as simply noticing that you're activated, without judgment. Next comes regulation, helping your nervous system return to a place of safety. From there, reflection allows you to explore what the trigger is reminding you of. Repatterning involves choosing healthier beliefs and responses that better reflect your present reality. Finally, connection means responding consciously instead of reacting automatically, strengthening both your relationship with yourself and with others. Healing happens one choice at a time, literally through micro daily choices. Every moment of awareness creates an opportunity to reinforce a new pattern rooted in safety, compassion, and resilience. Now take at least 5 to 15 minutes to reflect, as this writing opportunity is meant to help you recognize that emotional reactions often reflect learned protective strategies rather than the present reality. Think about a recent situation that triggered a strong emotional reaction. What happened? What emotions came first? What beliefs surfaced? What protective behavior followed? What did your nervous system believe was happening? This exercise isn't about judging yourself or proving that your feelings were wrong. It's about increasing awareness of the patterns that influence your reactions. The more honestly you explore your emotional experiences, the easier it becomes to recognize them in real time. Reflection transforms triggers from moments of suffering into opportunities for healing, growth, and greater emotional freedom. Continue reflecting. Continue thinking about a recent situation that triggered a strong emotional reaction. Write your answers out to these prompts. My biggest emotional triggers are, when I feel triggered, the emotion underneath is, what story did your mind immediately begin telling? What did you need in that moment that perhaps wasn't being expressed? Remember, you aren't judging yourself or proving that your feelings were wrong. It's about increasing awareness of the patterns that influence your reactions. The more honestly you explore your emotional experiences, the easier it becomes to recognize them in real time. Reflection transforms triggers from moments of suffering into opportunities for healing, growth, and greater emotional freedom. Here we have key takeaways. Let's conclude with the most important ideas from today's lesson. Emotional triggers are not signs of weakness, as they're invitations to better understand yourself. Attachment patterns are learned adaptations that developed to help you survive, and they can change through intentional healing. Your nervous system naturally seeks safety before connection, which is why regulation is such an important part of growth. Awareness creates choice, and repeated choices create new patterns. Every time you pause, regulate, reflect, and respond intentionally, you're strengthening healthier neural pathways and building greater emotional resilience. Healing isn't about becoming someone new, as it's about remembering the secure, authentic self that has always been within you. Secure attachment can be cultivated throughout life. Thank you for learning with us. Remember to subscribe for more Return to Wholeness curriculum education, reflection, integration, transformation. Next steps. Listen to today's guided practice, which is Trigger to Curiosity, available in the course playlist. Continue to the next lesson. If you are seeking a supportive community, consider joining the Remote Holistic Reset Group program. Learn more about it at HeidiMarquez.com/Holistic Reset Group program. Claim your complimentary introductory consultation with us at https://calendly.com/return-to-wholeness/15mins. As we end this lesson, remember, the more honestly you explore your emotional experiences, the easier it becomes to recognize them in real time. Reflection transforms triggers from moments of suffering into opportunities for healing, growth, and greater emotional freedom. Also remember that the Return to Wholeness method provides a clear pathway for lasting transformation. We begin by becoming aware of our patterns, discovering their root causes, creating safety through regulation, releasing what no longer serves us, repatterning the subconscious, reconnecting with our authentic self, embodying new ways of living, and continually returning to wholeness. Healing isn't about becoming someone new, as it's about remembering who you've always been beneath your survival patterns. Thank you again for joining today's lesson. We encourage you to take a few moments to reflect on what resonated most and consider one small practice you can begin applying before moving on to the next lesson. Remember, awareness is the beginning of healing, but transformation happens through consistent practice, compassionate curiosity, and the willingness to create new experiences of safety. Until next time, remember who you are. Return to wholeness. Subscribe for more.